Good morning and welcome to the Bee Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast. And I'm super thrilled to have with us today Ginger Cooper. And I should have said good morning and good afternoon because it's 3 p.m. in San Francisco for Ginger. Isn't that right, Ginger?
Yep, sure is.
How are you, Ginger? I love your name, by the way. I love it's such a gorgeous name. I haven't come across a Ginger in, gosh, for a very long time. So yeah, it's a very distinctive name. I love it.
Thank you. I always joke that I never know if I grew into my personality because of my name or if it just, or if it's genetic. So
Yes.
one will
Oh,
never.
whatever goes, right?
Yeah.
But Ginger,
Yeah.
we've got so much to talk about, and we've got quite a lot in common. But and I want you to talk about a bit about your backstory, but just to kind of give a bit of a glimpse into, founder and CEO of Summit Success Group. So you're strategic. It's a tr strategic consultancy, and dedicated to these life science companies through complex transformations. And you've got like 20 years plus in global experience, especially leading initiatives in, we'll call it change management, ACA, messy, complex problems, because we were just talking about that before, and I can't wait to get into that. But this M&A integration and process improvement, commercial strategy, and delivering sustainable results. With obviously significant cost savings. So tell us a little bit about what kind of your backstory and how then you come to having your own company.
Sure. How far back do you want to
Do you want to go back?
go? So as you mentioned, right, I've been in the life sciences industry for over 25 years. Uh, I got into my career by accident, which is probably how I can best describe the rest of my career is by curiosity and accident,
Mm,
right? And so I got into sales because I thought that it was the easiest job in a company and you got paid the most amount of money and did the least amount of work. I'll say that because I was doing like an office manager job out of college and felt like I was doing all the work. The joke was on me, right? Sales was hard. But but I loved it, right? I went to college for a clinical lab science degree and I was really bad in the lab. Um, Once I master something, it's time for me to move on, right? If
mm.
it's not engaging my brain, this goes to the complex, messy problems, right? If I'm not engaging my brain trying to sort and figure something out, I won't pay attention.
I'm the
And,
same.
right? So, but that's really bad doing lab work when you're
Oh,
dealing with chemicals
yeah.
and experiments where you need to get things to grow and you have to pay attention. You need to not blow things up. So anyway, I had a wonderful mentor who steered me towards industry and it's where I've spent thankfully the remainder of my career. And I'm still in touch with her today and I love talking with her about the impact that she's had on my life. But the rest of my career has been from, varying responsibilities in commercial, right? From being a sales rep to taking on building out a distributor network in Latin America to taking on different product lines because I wanted to see if I was good at what I did, i.e., sales. Because I loved robots, I was always in lab automation, or if I was really just good at sales, right? So I pivoted and started selling something I had knew nothing about. That was a fun challenge. I was good at it, so that was great. And then I shifted out of that for a little bit and took on I got into more of this digital landscape in the biotech and pharma industry. There was a shift, 2016, 2017
Mm,
from hardware automation to digitizing or automating your data workflows,
mm.
which is what we're seeing now in the world today. And that was fascinating. It was new. It was exciting. So I did that, and then I bailed, I'll say, on a sales career and jumped into corporate and started doing M&A integrations, which were complex and messy, filled with people problems, as you know, right? You've done it. No one is ever happy with you, ever. Someone's always upset with you. It doesn't matter who. And it was hard, right? It was hard. It was challenging. I did it for 4 years. I did 7 integrations in
Yes,
four
that's a
years.
lot. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I've been in two, and yeah, it was intense.
Yeah.
Because you've got like two sets of values, like two different cultures. You're trying to bring whoever's acquired the business, they're kind of they're being the other company or whoever's being rebranded generally under that company. Um, I've been an employee many, many moons ago when I went when there was an M&A happening and I was the employee, but I've also been in the leadership when it's like as managing director, and pulling the two together, and also then having to work through, well, what skills do we need and what you don't you need. Yeah, it's putting that all together, and no one loves you at that point in time because everyone's kind of it's upheaval, right? It's messy upheaval, and it's one of the
Mm.
most complex problems that you're trying to then work through and navigate your way through. And you don't have all the answers. Like don't always have all the answers, and everyone wants the answers there and then. And you're like, we're working through it. Like we're learning as much. Do you know what I mean? Because you're learning about these two different cultures. How do you put them together? Generally, they get smashed together. Like I don't know if that's what you're, and it's kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard, right? Because if you have any empathy or realization of other people, right? When you're going through this, if you're the acquirer, it's so hard. For me, it was really hard to sit in front of people and ask them to outline everything that they've probably spent their lives building, right? It just so that you can systematically pick it apart. Right. And it's in putting myself in their shoes. It's hard. It hurts. It sucks. They don't know what job they're going to have. They don't know, what, they're leading. I call it a fear state, right? Like no
Yeah.
one, the incoming company is in their best state, right? It's this fear state. It takes you 30 minutes at the beginning of every meeting to even get to the agenda because there's this
Tension.
well, the tension, but then also people feel like they have to either advocate for themselves or their team and be like, this is why we're so great and you should keep us. Right. And then you can kind of
Yeah,
get to the
you're
agenda,
right.
and I always say a lot of what I talk with people about when if I'm consulting or engaging on an integration project with them or an acquisition project is who you work for is such a personal choice, right? And it's a choice for the like all of us
Mm,
until there's an acquisition. And then that choice is taken away. And then you wake up one morning and you're just told who you're working for now.
mm,
And you don't know anything about this company, or if you do, only what you hear from like friends who have worked there or what you hear in the news, right? Depending. And so there's this big scary unknown, which just crashes productivity. I mean, there's just none.
mm,
I mean,
mm.
I am sure you've encountered that too, right? And so it's like, how do you lead through that, calming people down when you don't have all the answers yourself because you have no idea what you're going to uncover during the next conversation,
Yeah,
right?
it's interesting you bring the empathy piece up because you're obviously an empathetic leader. And I'm a heart on my sleeve empathetic leader as well, and it's all about the people. And so for me, it is really I always made sure or ensured in these M&A situations that I really got to know the people that we were or the business that we were acquiring and in terms of having those one-to-ones. And obviously we had an integration team as well, and it was all around the processes and things like that. But if you think about holistic transformation, and we were going to talk about this as well, like you're fundamentally and holistically transforming a whole entire organization, one that is, has just been acquired, and almost uprooting them, and it's all upheaval. But then you've got
Mhm.
an existing business that also needs to be transformed as well. And so what does that new form or shape of the company look like going forward? And so you're wanting to take aspects of the other business and then bring that into into the existing business, and it's a delicate dance, but it also requires real empathy, like you say, curiosity, and just understanding the people and, like you say, the emotions of the people, but also knowing when to be able to, I won't disassociate's the wrong word, but then also being able to go, all right, I'm just going to have to now work through. I'm listening and I'm being empathetic, but I also need to, I've got to take us forward. So how do I take us forward? And so I don't
Mhm.
know about you, but the one thing that I always ensured was that you take people on the journey. Like you're constantly, when you're going through like a merger, an M&A, when, rubber's hitting the road and, the team have joined the company day one or whatever, this is what our roadmap looks like.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of businesses that they hold up a PowerPoint or a presentation and it's death by slides, right? And there's no substance behind it. Like it's like we're doing this, and you hold up this big shiny PowerPoint or whatever, and then it's like, and then what? And then nothing happens, and it's like, well, any wonder you've got so much disengagement, like not enough productivity, all of that. Like, what's your view on?
Yeah, so that seems to be the same in many companies when I talk with other people who also ran integrations or still do run integrations. Um, my approach, so I led one, it was really interesting. I had always been responsible for the commercial teams, right? So integrating the commercial teams and designing the strategy for that. And then my last when I worked for Agilent, we acquired a company that I had actually started my sales career with. And so it's a great lesson and a good data point to don't burn your bridges, right?
Yeah,
Because we'll
that's a really
encounter
good
people
lesson.
again. Um, and so, I had actually left that company to go and work for Agilent many years ago. And so I had the opportunity to actually run the whole integration. And it had an amazing culture, a family-owned company, they weren't broken, right? And so this was, and they had prided themselves on transparency, communication, and they were based in Vermont here in the US. And so I moved out to Vermont for the role, and then COVID hit. So
Uh,
then I had to do this in the middle of COVID. So you talk about taking a warm, small, tight-knit family-like organization into a multinational, tens of thousands of employees, like during COVID. So I did it with a lot of communication, right?
mhm,
I lots of town halls,
mhm,
lots of open-ended dialogues, office hours, right? Introducing slowly culture on both sides, right? What
mhm.
makes this incoming company unique? What makes
Yeah.
Agilent unique? I would do mixed panels. I would like have people come in who had been acquired, right? I stood up these, what I called them Agilent hours. And it was a monthly slow introduction to culture on both sides.
Mm,
And, there's no right formula for this, as you know, right? There's always something that's going to go wrong with an integration.
mm.
As long as it's something different than the last integration, then you're improving each time. As long as you're
Totally.
making like new mistakes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I think slow introductions to cultures, really getting the acquiring company to understand that the incoming company or the acquired company isn't bad, right? And that there are pieces of it that are good.
Yeah.
And just because you've done it this way for years, doesn't mean that they're done it this way for years is wrong,
Mm.
right? Let's look for the the areas that they maybe do things better than us and see if we can adopt it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Like it's that kind of, what are the connective tissue, or what are the connective
Yeah.
points that you can better interconnect it together? So
Mhm.
how did your business then start? Like, so you've had all this experience in everything we've just been talking about and some, but then how did you become the founder and CEO of Summit Success Group?
So it sounds like similar to you. I mean, I had a great career in corporate, right? I loved it. Tons of complex puzzle pieces to solve.
We're going to come
And
to that too.
yeah, and I got burnt out. I got really tired of um trying to fit into a corporate box, if you will. I like to explore new novel things, right? I build, fix, and deploy. In corporate, operationalizing is usually more rewarded. So being in a role for 5 or more years, showing consistency, steady, I will lose my mind
Mm.
if that happens. And I was on a hike in Patagonia and I was like, oh, I need to just go. Right. It's like the freedom in everything of just being out and and just taking these chances to just be done with corporate. And so I did. I left corporate on December of 22. I did about a 1 year at a startup, right, as the chief commercial officer, and which was great, but it made me also realize I was really ready to just be my own boss.
Yeah.
And so then I stood up my own consulting company. And this way I love it. I get to take on the projects I like. I don't have to do anything I don't like.
Yeah.
And I get to work with people I enjoy. And for the last whatever year and a half, I haven't really worked much because I wanted to enjoy life. And so I've had a lovely balance of hiking pretty much all over Europe during the summers while working part-time solving problems.
I love that. I love that. But I think that part of the whole coming out of that box, that corporate box, and I totally
Yeah.
get it. Like that was me being in that rigid, fixed form where I was just like, oh, like I'm done. But I was also exhausted and the burnout and everything that, you probably no doubt encountered also. And it was like this whole brain explosion or mind body soul explosion that was just like, rah, it was getting louder and louder. And I think that I called my break a life break because I needed a break. Like, and I needed to be able to kind of explore and be curious. And you say you've like the last year and a half, you've been doing all these amazing things. But that I think is just almost like recalibrating and, kind of shaping and reshaping who you are and how you go forward and your business. I talk to people now about how, I used to always like let life fit into like life fitted into what was it? It was work was like central and life fitted into my work, whereas it's now no, 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 work needs to fit into my life. I think I've got that right. Haven't had that coffee yet this morning, but do you know what I mean? And so I feel like that's the recalibration that you're talking about and that I've also had to do as well. And it's almost like there's this a little bit of like an element of you, it's not shame, but you're almost like going, yes, I've taken a bit like I'm not working as much. And it's almost like this, and I could hear it in your voice because I do it sometimes too, where it's like I'm not working as much as what I did previously. But I don't think that was normal either, right? Like it wasn't sustainable. But there's this element of me, and I could hear you. It was just this little bit of a like you're happy doing what you're doing, but you're almost like it's that. I don't know. It's just
Sheepish about it, right? It's like,
yeah. It's
I'm
it was
59
sheepish,
years
like, and
old.
that's
I'm
yeah.
like,
I know.
oh,
And then you think, oh,
yeah, yeah,
should I be doing this? Shouldn't I be doing this? But
yeah.
here's the thing, right? Like, how happy were you previously? Probably nowhere near as happy as you are now. Um, and so that's my big thing.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think about it probably similar to you. I'm a highly productive person. And so you say working however many hours a week I worked in corporate was probably the equivalent of 4 people, right?
Same.
Or 3 people, right? And so even though I'm cautious and choosy about how much work I take on now, it's to be able to do the things that I love. Like I spent the month of December in Zimbabwe, and 2 weeks of that was volunteering in an animal sanctuary.
Oh,
And
amazing.
right. And just being able to tap out for a month, tell my clients, hey, I'm offline, for a month. And I got to hang out with these amazing, rescue animals
Mm,
for, a couple of weeks and refill my soul, right. And fill
mm.
my cup. Um, and I'm taking on more clients now because I feel ready.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, right, it's that recalibration of what is important in life.
Yeah.
Stepping away from corporate allowed me to not have my title, my level, my salary define who I am or how successful I am as a person. Like me, my insides get to determine, like, my happiness is my success,
Yeah.
right?
100.
Like, happy I am,
Oh,
right?
I love that. And I'm with you. Like, and there's a couple of things I want to tap into there that you're ready now. And sorry, that was, I guess, what I was going to get to before in terms of you needed this like past year and a half. And yes, you've been super productive and probably doing more than others have, generally. And I'm the same. But I don't think there's a time frame on how long it takes for you to almost recover, if you like, or reconnect is probably a better word. Reconnect with what's going on in here and who you are and what you are. And then you're like, oh, and it's almost like the lights start to come back on again. You're like, okay, yep, I'm actually fully connected with who I am. I've got a new perspective. I'm, a new form of myself, which isn't like being dictated by, like you say, what success is. We've been ingrained in us for so many years on what success should look like versus what success looks like now. And I think that's just something really from a societal that there's still so much work to be done in that space. With people, with leaders, with teams, etc. Because there's just this probably like you, I still, even clients, just like this, there's some of them are just miserable and you start to delve into what's actually going on here. And then they're like, nothing, nothing. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I know what's going on here.
Well, and you wonder, right, if the leader themselves are not happy, right? If they're not fulfilled, if they're not content, and they're doing it out of a sense of obligation because society says I must be financially successful or have this title to have made it, right?
Mm.
Like what is making it? Then if that's how they're showing up with you, with me, like with others, how are they leading? Because it projects out. Your, what do they say, your shadow is long,
Mm.
when you're at the top, right? And so I have conversations, with clients a lot where it's just like, well, how are you leading? Like, how are you doing? I'll ask, like, are you like, how's your self-care? What are you doing for
Oh.
yourself these days?
Mm.
And they're always a little taken aback because I'm not, a coach. I'm there to change their business world. But understanding who they are as people is critical, like you talked about, to that culture piece. Because if they're not changing how they show up and communicate, doesn't matter what operational things I can put
Yeah.
in,
No,
you know?
exactly. Well, that's that whole inside out piece for me, like that inside out transformation in terms of, and let's start talking about messy, complex problems and, what you're doing with businesses in terms of transformation and change. For me, the inside out piece is understanding exactly what you're talking about. What's actually going inside this leader? Like what's happening within here or what's happening inside the founder or the CEO? Because it starts within. It's like, when you look at within inside a business, you got to get the inside aspect of the business right before that they can go to market or they can go externally or whatever. And it's no different from an individual or a leader to a business as well. Like, so what sort of problems and, what do you see in businesses and leaders that like when you're going in there, is it generally it starts with a surface problem that they show to you going, we've got this problem. And then you're like, and then you start asking the questions, you get curious. And then the complexity of the problem, it starts like this, and it's just like out here. Like, what's your take on that?
Uh, I would say the same, right? For the short answer, the long answer is sure. I go in and it's like, hey, we want you to solve this or figure out how to do this, be it digitizing their workflows, streamlining operational efficiencies. And throughout, like, say, a sticky note process mapping process, right? You start hearing and asking questions because one person will say this or one person will say that, or you find out an organization of just 70 people don't know what the other one is doing. And I'm like, how is that possible? You're all like right here with each other. How do you have such silos in such a small organization? So then you get curious, you start digging in, you start finding the real reasons that disconnect started.
Mm,
And then you're like, okay, let's fix some of this disconnect or propose like, hey, here's what I found. This is why your people don't feel empowered.
mm.
This is why people aren't really doing things is because X, Y, and Z, right? And here's some possible ways to fix this, and so yeah, there's always the underlying reason. It's never as easy as sure, let's just clean up some process.
No, yeah, and how do you just on that? How do you like
Yeah.
they give you a surface problem and you see a really big, messy, complex problem? What
Mhm.
happens when you have? Do you ever have come across clients that just like they only want you to solve the surface problem? Like what you mentioned before, you get to choose who you work with now.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you ever just walk away from those surface problems if they're not interested in kind of wanting to get to into like actually getting into the messiness of the complexity of the problem and solving it that way? Or like do you generally find that you break them down and get to it?
Um, I'll say that the clients that I've engaged with to date have been appreciative of the other problems that I've uncovered because it ultimately makes the business stronger.
Yeah.
There's been one instance where I I drew a boundary of only delivering what I said I was going to deliver. I pointed out some areas of improvement, but it was not something I wanted to take on. It was too familiar to my family of origin. And I've done enough work on that. I didn't want to dive in and help them sort it out because none of them were in a place to want to work on it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, I'm going to deliver the strategy piece. I'm not going to, and I'm done. Right. So it was me who drew the boundary because it would have been a waste of, not a waste, but it would have been, it just wouldn't have been successful. And it's not something I wanted to take on.
Yeah, I actually really respect you for that. Like, I absolutely do because, and probably the additional question that would have was back in your corporate world, you just had to do whatever you had to do, right? Like, you like go back to M&A. Like, if there was something that you felt was completely against your values or your integrity, it was like, well, you just got to do it anyway. Whereas now, having your own company, you were like, this goes against my, origin, my family origin or whatever. I'm going to set some boundaries. That must feel really empowering. And I've had situations like this myself where it's like, no, I've done what I need to do, or I'm doing that. Oh, this is all I'm doing, and I will be setting boundaries. It's a very different feeling to when you're being forced to do something in the box you're in. Like, do you
Mhm.
do you agree with that? Like,
Yeah. Well, because I feel like every time at corporate, and they don't mean for this, but every time you still need to execute towards the plan, no matter if it's keeping a toxic employee in place, right? Because you have to or something, a little piece of my soul would die, right? It's like that creativity piece, like the yeah, it would just kind of die. And this way, setting that boundary was huge
mm,
because I was letting go of a potential lucrative contract,
well, that's
right?
for
To
me,
only
commercial.
do, yeah, and in trusting that I would get more business and it wasn't worth the hit to my internal system, like money wasn't worth it.
Mm.
Right. And it was really lovely to actually be able to make the choice. Like you said, there were plenty of times in corporate where I just felt defeated. I have a pretty strong moral compass. And so, if things happen, you just feel defeated. And
Yeah.
if you can't do anything about it, you just feel, I don't know. And so being able to walk away was, yeah, it was really powerful.
Yeah, and that internal system you're talking about here. Tell me, when it comes to having your own business and starting your own business, do you like is that do you feel like that's a messy, complex problem? Like, do you have days where you're like you kind of just I feel like every time I ask you a question, you're like just laughing or rolling your eyes because in the funniest way, because it's like we're connecting in this way or flowing, if you like. But it's like for me, it's constant, messy, complex good problem to have, but like what do they? I listened to a quote the other day where it was like, "Some days you survive, some days you're building," and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's so true." Which is what a messy, complex problem can be like, right? What's your take on that?
I I have realized how disciplined I am not. I am structured and I am organized, but God, I am not disciplined. And it is one of those do as I say, not as I do situations when I go in. And I recommend all of this process and all of this structure and all of this efficiency. And I am over here living in a complex, messy world. It's
Yeah,
yeah, it's I find I can't get out of my own way sometimes.
yeah,
You know, it's funny, I believe strongly in like an Enneagram, right? And so I'm very much like my Enneagram 7 right now. And I'm like, oh, what's over here? Oh, what's over there? And
the
the
novel experience.
task in front of me is like so boring. And so I won't do it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you were saying earlier. You get all excited, like the
Yeah.
novelty of things, right? But I think it's also I think as loving complex problems, as we love complex problems, I think when the problem isn't, or I don't know about you, but for me, once I've cracked or solved the complexity of the problem and it's kind of now just executing it, I kind of
Mm.
lose a little bit of it's or maybe it's a dopamine thing, I don't know, but it's almost like, oh, okay, now we're just doing it sort of thing. As much as I want to see it through and implement it. But for me, the real juicy part for me is when I'm at my best and I'm, shining my brightest is when I'm in the thick of this problem, where I'm seeing things that others can't see in terms of how to solve it
Mm.
and then I kind of solve it, or you work with others to solve it. Like I'm not, that's not coming from a place of ego,
Sure.
but you know what I mean. And then it's like, oh, or you have at times you might have just more less complex problems, but I think probably the less complex it is, the more probably boring isn't the right word, but it's not as
You're not as excited to jump into it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so
Like,
that's when it requires huge discipline. And sorry, you were going to say something then.
no, I was going to say I finished a great project and had amazing success with it. And a venture capital company was like, "Do you have a case study on it? Because once you get me the case study, I can shop you to my partners." And I was like, "No, but let me get that to you." That was like 4 months ago. Part of it is I wasn't sure I wanted the work that would come with shopping it around. The other part was, ugh, do I really have to pull together a case study now on the work? Right. It felt like a drag. And it took me waiting until I was with a group of people at a co-working space that I have like space at. And they were like, just do it. Or they were like, just have AI do it. Dump everything that you have into AI and have AI do it. And I was like, I never thought of that. Because it's like you're an assistant, right? It's like you get to do all of the hard, complex things. And then it's like you just need a scribe. I just need a scribe to finish it off. Right. Yeah.
I think that's also the team piece though, right? That's one thing when you're a solopreneur, entrepreneur, and you've gone from a team to then on your own. Yeah, you do need that. Like, yeah, I mean, I use AI like a lot from a productivity sense for that very reason, everything you're talking about. But yeah, I have moments where, it's funny, you go into a co-working space and you're surrounded by people and they're just like, just do it. And you're just like, yeah, why haven't I done it? But it's just this whole like I've got to get to it. But I don't know what it is. I find that at times too, and it's interesting that it's sitting there, it's been on the list for ages or whatever, and then you're just like, oh, why haven't I got to it? What is holding me back here? It's
Mhm.
very interesting. So tell me, what are you seeing as your biggest opportunities at the moment with regards to what you're doing in terms of like what are you seeing with clients? What's like what what are their big what are the big problems you're seeing at the moment in businesses or the complex problems and that are needing solving right now?
Yeah, probably no surprise. Everybody's looking how to do more with less, right? How to become more efficient, looking at their organizations, really running leaner, and where can they really implement digital tools,
Mm,
automated tools, right? To get results faster,
mm,
essentially, right? Everybody's looking to get results faster, less hands-on time, and save money to make more money in the
mm,
long run.
mm.
And it's a balance. I always say I don't recommend change for change's sake.
No.
There has to be a solid reason for it, right? So I'm seeing that a lot. There's a lot of, hey, can you take a look at this? Like, say it's a commercial journey, touch points along the way, be it systems and people, right? And how can we make this better?
Mm,
And in the same then with just scientific operations or people operations as well, right?
mm,
How can we make this better? And so there's a lot of focus on that right now.
mm.
Um, Less on the people side, but I weave that in anyway
Well, I think you need
because
to. I mean, we were saying earlier, you can't have a systems without a culture, and you can't have a culture without a system. Similar sort of thing. I think, I'm seeing also that there's focus on a specific area or one problem, but then when you get into look at that specific problem, you then see that it's all interconnected for me. So that's that holistic piece, right? And you don't want to, like you say, you don't want to change for the sake of change, but you also don't want to change one aspect of a problem that they want you to solve, for example, when you can see that there's a bigger part here. So for me, it's also about opening them up to look at it holistically, like the need to look at the business holistically when it comes to a problem or whatever you're trying to solve. Do
that's
you-
a really good point. Yeah, because and I wonder how you do this because if I'm brought in to only look at the commercial piece, but because of my curious nature and asking all of the questions, I know that there are other things
yeah,
that can fix this, but if you don't change this, it's not going to get you what you're looking for.
no,
And
exactly.
so how do you like approach that? Yeah, I'm curious to in your experience.
Yeah, so I've created my own methodology, like a form, like my formless methodology, and it's learn, unlearn, relearn, and then I've tapped in active recovery as well. But generally, recently I was asked to go in and work on a project with a company, and it was to look at um their internal comms strategy. But what I saw was that there was the need for this internal comms piece, which was all in people, in the people space. But there was also then this business strategy. And so by asking the questions like you're talking about and kind of going, can I see the business strategy? Can I see, other aspects of the business? Can I do interviews with, your exec team, etc.? What I saw was that there was a need to connect the business strategy and then an internal strategy, comm strategy would fall off that. And yet, if I hadn't have asked all those questions, and if I hadn't have said these two need to come together for better efficiencies, that ultimately the people want to know about the business strategy forward and the internal comms piece, if we just do an internal comms separate to a business strategy, well, the people are going to remain disengaged, and the KPIs were all around how do you engage the people. So
Okay.
generally, I will always look at it like that, or I'll pull out a plan on a page that I've created from a business plan perspective and go, right, we might be focusing, for example, on growth or commercial here,
Mhm.
but let's look at it from a total business perspective. And so that always gets people thinking in terms of, oh yes, I've got these other pillars, if you like, so how do you interconnect it all? Because ultimately you're wanting to connect an individual, the team, and the business into one interconnected ecosystem. Um, and so for me, and I use my methodology to unpack it in that way to then bring it all together. But not everyone is wanting to look at things holistically. And I guess for me, that can quite often, like, before when you were saying about setting your boundaries, it's just like I see something bigger. So,
Yeah.
that sometimes is, well, we only want this. So it's like, but if we had all of this, it would be all interconnected, but we only want this. So that's always sometimes my battle, or, just going, all right, okay, so I've just got to focus on this slow and steady, just bit by bit, you can more holistically.
I think it's probably the challenge of the forever curious,
For,
right? Because we'll ask questions and we'll see things and we can see the bigger picture. And sometimes I have to remind myself, right? You were brought in to do this.
yeah,
You know, if you
100%.
start looking, yeah, if you start looking over here, you're going to get into trouble. So like come back.
Yeah, well, it's not part of your scope of work, for example. So
Exactly.
like it's
Yeah.
almost like you can go off and do all of that, but it's not part of the scope of work. So
Right.
Ginger, I knew we would keep talking, and I feel like I'm doing this with everybody. I am a talker as well, that we could just keep talking. But what are your big aspirations for you for the rest of this year? Any
Oh, personal aspirations.
Yeah, personal, business, both.
Yeah, business. So I think really for me, it's to get curious about my own business and my own growth, right? And to really make a concerted effort to be disciplined and take my own advice when it comes to just taking chances and diving in,
I love that.
and not being afraid of success,
I love that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. I need to take some of that on board at times too.
I
Well,
think
thank
we all
you. And
do.
how can we find out more about you?
Oh, sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Ginger Cooper. My handle is Robot Princess.
Yeah. I loved that. I was like, that was amazing. Yeah.
A throwback to my old automation days, where I was forever known as Robot Princess, or a really long website title of summitsuccessgroup.com,
Yeah.
is where you can find out about us.
But that's
So
cool. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I've really enjoyed our chat today. Have a lovely afternoon.
thanks. Have a
And
great day. Get some coffee.
I will. I'm gonna take my puppy for a walk now, and she'll be ready to go crazy. Go get a coffee.
Sounds great. Well, yeah, thanks so much for chatting.
No, thank you.